Thanks, Akila, and hi again, everyone. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, my friend, my boss, my coach from Alberta, Greg Bass, who's the Deputy Minister of Education in that province. Greg has a number of years of experience from all facets of the education system. Like us, he was a student once. But more importantly, he was a teacher, he was a principal, he was a superintendent, and now since about June of last year, I think he was appointed Deputy Minister of Education. And I'm sure Greg would agree that since he became Deputy Minister of Education in Alberta, it's just been one pleasant surprise after another. I've seen his office and it's really nice, so I'm sure it was nice when he got there and he saw how nicely set up it all was, and it was a pleasant surprise to find out just how terrific his team is there in the department in Alberta. Certainly was a pleasant surprise to find out how energetic and passionate his minister is about driving change in education and how easy it is to keep up with him. But the most pleasant surprise that Greg had was when he found out that Alberta was going to become chair of CMEC, which meant that as well as his minister being chair of all the ministers, that means that Greg gets to chair the Committee of Deputy Ministers. So that as well as working on inspiring education in Alberta, he just has to build consensus with 21 other deputy ministers across the provinces and territories in his spare time. And it's been great fun working with Greg on that. And I wasn't joking about coach. He's been a coach in the sporting sense, I think throughout his adult life. But I think he's also enjoys coaching change. And leading change in organizations, and I'm sure if anyone out there either wants to play a hockey game or drive an organization through change, one of those two things, they can call on Greg for some advice at how to do that. So I know you'll enjoy hearing from him, and I think Carol again is going to lead this discussion. So thank you, Carol, and welcome to both you and to Greg Bass from Alberta.
Thanks. Hi, Greg. Can you see me?
Hi, Carol. Yes.
Good. Well, this is going to be very interesting because in Alberta, they just produced a new plan, vision, not sure what you want to call it, Greg, Inspiring Alberta. So we are looking, Greg, for you to inspire Ontario. But I thought we might just start off with what are the 3 E's, I read your plan last night, and some of the elements of the plan, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you very much. If I could start off, Carol, I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to be speaking with the Learning Partnership. And I understand from Andrew, thank you for that wonderful introduction. My wife would tell me I'm not a very good hockey player, never really was a very good hockey player. It was just in my mind. But certainly, just the opportunity, Andrew said that there's a wonderful working relationship that we have with the Learning Partnership across Canada. And I just want to thank everybody there that's in attendance for that, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I just want to confirm how much time we have, so that I can either abbreviate.
About 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, yeah. Then I'll be as abbreviated as I can be. Inspiring education is our vision for transformation, transforming the education system in Alberta. The conversation began in 2008. It took 18 months to develop. 4,000 Albertans were directly engaged through roundtable conversations, but in addition to that, tens of thousands completed online surveys. All the organizations in the province, business and community partners as well, and the usual stakeholders, teachers associations, school board associations, everybody signed on and said this was absolutely the right direction for education. 2010, the vision was launched. And we're working very hard in the ministry and in the province of Alberta on a number of components that are outlined in that document. I think the key, Carol, for the group to understand, I think, is that within that document, the paradigm shift that's most essential is that we are rebuilding the education system through a student-centric lens. And what I mean by that is all of the facets that we've come to know as we were all students at one point, and we may have family members that work in the education system. We understand that when we talk about all facets of the system and why this change is really different, we're looking at all facets of the system from the curriculum that's taught and the way students are assessed, to the types of schools that we build and the spaces we provide, to the way teachers teach, and how we celebrate teaching excellence, to the time of day, to the programs that are offered, to the way in which students can move through courses. So those types of facets that we're talking about are extremely significant, and they do create some fear in some folks that don't understand the breadth and the complexity. The vision is really pushing us out to 2030 and beyond. And another one of the key factors, Carol, I think one of the best quotes I like in the document is that we're striving to prepare students for their future, not our past. The 3 E's, we're striving for, engaged thinkers who are ethical citizens with an entrepreneurial spirit. This government is passionate about all of those. The entrepreneurial spirit is really engaging business and community and industry, and really trying to ensure that we can capture all of that innovation and creativity that's in the world around the education system and infuse it into our system. And as Minister Johnson affectionately talks about, and he's a wonderful man and a great champion of this work, also one of the co-chairs of the steering committee for Inspiring Education. He talks about the fact that if when students come out of school, whether it's high school or advanced ed, and if there are no jobs in their areas, that they have that mindset to go and create one. And that's the best way to describe the entrepreneurial spirit. We know from an engaged thinker point of view that certainly my perspective is that disengagement is an unintended consequence of an industrialized or factory model of the education system. I don't think we mean to do harm, but the fact of the matter is, I think disengagement is one of the outcomes. And Tell It For Me survey work led by Dr. Wilms and Dr. Friesen out of Calgary here shows some pretty sad results from across this country, that as high as 70% of students when they enter into high school would be categorized as disengaged, and by grade 5, as many as 50% of students. So we have a system that I think all of us have a system that really needs to be examined and rebuilt in students' best interest.
Greg, one of the things we've been talking about today is the partnership between business and the education sector. How important is that in your plan, and do you have any practical examples of how you drive that engagement if it is important?
Great question. It's very important to us here, and I think one of the perspectives, of course, is that what our minister hears, what our government hears, is that our teachers in classrooms who are wonderful people, do great work. That sometimes there's a bias or a perceived bias that the perspectives that are brought forward are not necessarily always capturing all of the best practices. And I'll use the expansive work in Fort McMurray as an example. If through curriculum, one of the curricular outcomes is to examine environment and environmental sustainability, it would be easy to go down the road of looking at all of the impacts and the various things. But one of the untold stories, of course, in that industry is all of the innovation and technological application that's really the leading edge sector in the entire world. And so it's really looking at business and industry being able to ensure that we can thread all of that content and that innovative sort of spirit and thinking into the education system. It's not to sort of say that one is better than the other, but it's to really provide a balanced perspective. A really good example, Carol, is we just launched a curriculum prototyping project in Alberta, and I'm sure you've heard little snippets in Ontario or wherever everybody's from there in the media, and they're having some fun with us. But the fact of the matter is only a portion of the story is being told. And with our curriculum prototyping, it's very, very exciting. Teachers for years have told us that the curriculum is far too content laden, and it's based on just a number of sort of knowledge-based outcomes, and it's really tough to get through it all. And we're moving to a competency-based curriculum. Our curriculum will have the foundational components of literacy and numeracy threaded into all curricula, but we'll move to potentially 10 competencies in social studies, for example, versus 60 or 80 learning outcomes. And that will allow our teachers to focus on instructional design and really try to push the application of that knowledge, because we live in a world today, we believe, to prepare students for success, they need to be able to really absorb that knowledge, but then apply it into a real world context. So with those prototyping sites, business and industry, we have 6 prototyping sites around the province. School boards are leading them, teachers are leading the work, but there are business and industry partners in every one of those prototyping sites, NRF and MI, as the communities, as there are groups, non-governmental groups that are working alongside, environmental groups that are working alongside these school board-led collaboratives to develop recommendations on the new competencies should be in our curriculum. So business and industry play a critical role, and that's now
Greg, change is never easy, especially in a large institution. So can you talk to me or talk to the room a little bit about how did you drive the change, get people on side? You've got many stakeholders, and everyone has an opinion on education, from the parents to the students to the teachers to the government. So help us understand how you drove such a massive change and did it with what appears from the outside to look like not too much backlash.
Yeah, and I would say, just to pick up your last comment first, Carol, the backlash that it's a well orchestrated movement, a small but mighty group of 6 individuals, and one of them has the power of the pen in a national effort. But when you talk to teachers on the ground and you talk to superintendents and parents and business, the work, very, very excited about the work that we're doing in the education system. So you're absolutely right. We have very, very strong support despite some of the noise. And I would argue that I'll use an Oliver I'll take the back half of it, but it says that he really strives to have complexity before simplicity. And you can have a simple process on the front end and really have a really complicated future, or you can step back and have a complicated process that should provide sort of a halfway forward. So I would argue that taking 18 months, massive consultation with Albertans across every corner of this province and every small community has given the government the license to say this was the vision that was created by Albertans for our future, by transforming our education system. So I would say that's one critical element, Carol, that we're able to go back and share with people that it's really powerful when you go back to your teachers association and say, let's not get wobbly kneed on this one, because you were fully behind this when we started. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure. Our system is very much accustomed to incremental or additive change, one little tweak or adjustment at a time. And I think counseling people as we move through that it's going to be okay, that we're doing this because we care about the children of Alberta. We have their interest at heart, and we're not trying to do harm. I think those type of coaching conversations help along the way too. But I think the very way Inspiring Education was built is a fundamental part of this process.
One of the things that struck me is that when we look at Alberta, we see a very successful educational system. You score well, your students are doing well. What motivated you, given that you were doing well, to actually drive this change? It would have been easy to have done nothing and not be criticized for it.
True. Perhaps, and I would have hoped if the path had been different, that if we weren't doing anything, that we would have been criticized. Because when you look at some other leading nations in the world, we're not leading in Alberta. We're playing some catch up. Finland, New Zealand are 2 that come to mind right now, and in the case of the Finns, of course, it's not a battle between Alberta and Finland, but I've heard the rhetoric for the last decade that you're always waiting to see who's coming out on top of whom in that battle on PISA results and things. So the same question Finland's dealing with, I'm sure, as well, but they're ahead of us on curriculum redesign. They're ahead of us on a lot of other facets. I would think that, I guess I would credit the courage of Albertans and the courage of this government to say, Albertans spoke loud and clear. We know this is going to be messy. We know that it's going to be a significant amount of work, and we know we're mapping out 2 or 3 decades worth of work and change. But Albertans said that this is what they needed and what they wanted. In my previous life as a superintendent, we actually, prior to Inspiring Ed, we actually embarked on a very similar process with a collaboratively built plan. Took a year to do it. But what was really interesting is that parents were saying to me that the education in our high schools, especially, and the way, more importantly, the way students were being taught was inconsistent and growing further and further gapped with what they categorize as the real world. And I think I credit Albertans globally, like across the province, for having that strength of character to say, yeah, we have a strong system, but how are we going to prepare students for their future, and what types of competencies are they going to need in 20, 30, 40, 50 when they're the leaders and we're watching them lead. The fact of the matter is, we know that by 2050, a lot of the challenges that the children that are entering our system today are going to be, leading our province, our country, and our globe through are significantly different than the ones that we were faced with. And I think one of the greatest quotes that I reference once in a while is from Roland in 1999. He said, education in the 21st century doesn't need to change. It can be consistent with the 20th, as long as we can guarantee that the challenges that our children are going to face will be the same. And I think we know that the rapid rate of change just, in the world, I think is indicating that we need a system that is going to prepare students for success and needs to change.
If you were giving us advice on change in the system here, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give to this group?
Interesting question. I don't think I'm probably qualified to give you advice. I know there's a tremendous amount of talent in that room. Do you mean advice with engaging in the change, or? Yeah,
well, I have seen in my career many change initiatives that fail miserably, and you always hit obstacles along the way, and some people are very good at maneuvering around them. So if we were to embark on what sounds to me like quite a transformational change that you're doing in education, are there 1 or 2 things that you would say, for goodness sake, don't do this until you do that, or a few pearls of wisdom from you, Greg?
Sure. Well, I'm actually working on my doctoral research right now, and I'm very close, after many, many years, to finishing it. But one of the interesting things from that research, surveying leaders in the jurisdiction I was in, to try to unearth the phenomenon that we had gone through, because that organization did go through change, there were some critical characteristics that emerged. So I'll share those with you. I think the first one, and we have Inspiring Ed in place, I think any organization needs to look at a collaboratively built and universally administered vision. So to create a vision at the top, whatever the top looks like, and pushing it, it's really tough for staff within your organization to get that buy-in. I often talk about Johnson's tour of the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral, after he was sworn in after the Kennedy assassination. He wanted to tour it. And when he was touring with his officials, an individual came up to him in a NASA suit with a name tag and said, hello, Mr. President Johnson, I'm so and so, and President Johnson said, it's great to meet you. What do you do here? And he said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon, sir. And apparently, as the story goes, and I'm sure it's legend now, it's probably didn't go this way, but as the story goes, he was very annoyed with that. He sent his officials back to find the fellow and find out what he really did. And so his officials came back and said, President, we know what he does. And he said, well, tell me. And he said, he's a custodian here. And so the vision and the direction was so resolute within that NASA program that they'd have a man on the moon by the end of the decade, that the custodian, or one of the custodial staff, took it upon himself when he met the commander-in-chief to describe his role as helping to put a man on the moon. That type of clarity that runs from top to bottom, bottom to top in an organization, I believe is instrumental. I'll just hit a second one because you'd asked for 2. I think really investing, and I don't necessarily mean financially, but it could be, but looking at the structures you have in an organization to invest in creating collaborative structures, professional learning structures, so that everybody is a learner. It's easy for us in the education system, and might I be so bold to say, even for the business and business sector, to say the students are the learners, but the rest of us can operate the same. I think the fact of the matter is, in 2014 and beyond, we're all learners, and we all need to embrace that. That's exciting. And so as you look at your organizational change, we know, going to one of Senge's quotes, organizations don't change, people do. And so there needs to be this 360-degree look at the structures you have in organizations to say, what are the things that we can set up and structure so that people can work on developing their capacity as individuals, once again, as a through line to that vision and the direction of the organization, which they help to create. Now, how can I, as a team member, build my capacity to make even greater contributions toward it? So those, I'd say, would be two essential conditions.
If anyone in the audience has any questions, if you write them down, I think it's probably more efficient to ask Greg that way. A question I have, I found it quite interesting because we talked a lot here today about jobs and how early should we be helping students be introduced to career management, that sort of thing. What I found interesting was you said the minister says, if you don't have a job, then invent one, which I think speaks to that entrepreneurial part of your strategy. But I'm kind of curious about that because we do a lot of hand-wringing in Ontario about, we've got a skills mismatch, we've got high unemployment with youth, and I don't think I've ever heard a minister say, well, if you don't have a job, then create one. So I found that interesting.
So he's an entrepreneur himself. Prior to politics, he's very, very passionate about it. I guess he's certainly in his travels internationally, he's looked at some economies and talked to some individuals in some economies, some ministers and various politicians, and they've talked about the youth unemployment rate and so that's really where his push comes, is to say that we need to be looking at financial and economic literacy in our schools and be building those competencies and really look at the fact that you have in Canada, the wonderful country that it is, you have opportunities to create your own destiny. And some of us work with government and we find a job there, or with school boards, or with the health sector, and extremely valuable people that provide that service to society. But he wants to ensure that students also know a viable alternative is to really take the change upon yourself, and it really maps onto the 21st century competencies we talk about in Inspiring Ed, and what the business community has certainly told us as well, and certainly leading research, is that we certainly are at a point today, and certainly in the future, that competencies like the ability to collaborate, students working in teams as they become workers, either on their own or for an organization, and innovative thinking and being wired for that and being creative. I often say that we know that we'll be successful when our advanced education institutions here in Alberta will not only look at our diploma exams of our students and the averages that they get on those, but they'll also look at the metrics that we design for measuring innovative thinking and creativity. And if they're off the charts on those particular competencies, maybe they should be the first students to get into biomedicine because they'll cure cancer. Not that the student that gets 99% average on the diploma exams is not worthy. It's really looking at skills that and competencies that we see are really going to be drivers for success for all of us. This isn't just an Alberta conversation. We don't believe. We think it's critical for Canada's future prosperity and quite frankly the globe. So.
And here's the last question from the audience. Can you talk about the role of charter schools in Alberta's education system, particularly their role related to innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we have 15 charter schools right now in Alberta, brought in, I believe, in 1997. I could be wrong, but I believe that was the year. I should know that exactly. All with specific charters. And on a 5-year renewal basis. The new Ed Act coming out next September, the provisions have been extended to to really look at a 15-year approvals, so really moving them to more permanent within the system. But whoever asked the question is very well informed, because the charters were originally designed to be innovative hubs that were driving innovation in the larger public system. And I guess the rationale would be that they're not a big, unwieldy organization, and they could turn fairly quickly and do some dynamic things. We know the greatest change agents in our system are teachers and classrooms. So, you know, the charters are working very hard at that. I think you could say, depending on what worldview you have, that the charters still need to do more work in that area to drive innovation into the public system. I think the original premise was that once they had served that purpose, they would fold into the public system. I think we're moving a different way, and we look at charters, and certainly parents are very supportive of the charters. We look at them as something that will be in Alberta for a long, long time, and we believe choice is one of the drivers that has made Alberta's system strong perennially. But the reality is we do need the charters. If I could be so bold to say, we do need the charters to go back to the original mandate, to be driving more innovation back into the public system. We're seeing some innovation going the other way, quite frankly, and so we're working with them.
Great. I think now it's my pleasure to ask everyone to thank Greg for taking the time to spend with us. It was interesting.